Hello, we're Obscure Reference today, back at it again with another Fingering the Pulse. Today we're reviewing and discussing the newest Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the didgeridoo of tomfoolery. The
The Lance of Longinus.
the
That was the
Zoom.
most ridiculous thing in this entire movie.
I
I
can't
hated that so
believe
much.
they pulled that out. I was not expecting that. They're like, well, we did the Holy Grail. Might as well pull out another Jesus art. Anyway, we'll get into it in a sec. But I'm one of your hosts, Patrick, and joining me today is the one who actually cares about content. It's Austin. Say hi, Austin.
Hello, hello. I'm the
Very
one that
cool.
actually got us to do this review. No one else wanted to see it.
Very true.
We
That's
didn't
very
get
true.
John here. I convinced Patrick though, so you're getting a
Yep.
duo.
Yep. You convinced me, and it wasn't hard. I do like Indiana Jones, and I was very curious to see how it actually stood up
And
compared to the
James
rest.
Mangold.
I do like James Mangold. I've seen one of his movies, and I liked it, kind of.
You haven't seen? Have you not seen both of the X-Men that
Mm-mm.
he's done, or both of the Wolverines he's done?
Nope. I wanted to see the Wolverine, I just didn't. And then I saw Logan like 2 years after it was out of theaters. So by that point, Deadpool 2 had already spoiled me on how it ended. So I'm not mad. Uh, but anyway, we're here to talk Indiana Jones. Uh, we're gonna go full spoilers right off the gate. So if you're interested in seeing this with a pure mind, pure thought, get out. We don't watch it. Come back when you've seen it. We'll be here probably. Um, but if you don't
It'll
care
be
about
a
that,
YouTube video.
it'll be up. We'll be here. And if you don't care about spoilers, then yeah, stick around. Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? It's Indiana Jones, baby. Woo! Okay. So right off the gate, what'd you think?
Oh man, this had all of the trappings of a good Indiana Jones movie. It had solid action. There was a great adventure. We had some good directing. Um, it had some big budget production behind it. But at every step of the way, something brought it down and made it just kind of an okay movie. And by the end, I was soured on it for reasons that we can get to. But in the beginning, that de-aging CGI for Harrison Ford
Mm-hmm.
made it that whole opening salvo like just not there for me. I just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you lost all of the emotion in Harrison Ford's face.
Yeah.
And then all of the action scenes in this movie, I kept thinking like, wow, this is a good, directed action scene. If only it wasn't an 80-year-old that was doing the action.
Yeah.
And so it brought a lot of the action down for me. And then although, all of the characters were well acted, I didn't like the kid or the bad version of Indiana Jones, the woman. I can't remember their names. But this like, oh, if Indiana Jones didn't have a conscience like
Yeah.
thing didn't
Phoebe
really work for me.
Phoebe Waller
So like,
Bridge.
yeah, Phoebe's character. So all of basically the entire movie up till the end, which was ruined in a different way for me, was kind of brought down from being well produced, well directed, just because of one thing or another. I don't. It just it made it go from what I think it could have been good. I don't think it would have been like
Mm-hmm.
the best Indiana Jones movie, but basically every scene was kind of brought down by that, so it was just kind of okay. It exists.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the ending, the second ending was worse than the first ending for me. So the I'm kind of annoyed by that. And ultimately, altogether, the thing that makes this the most frustrating for me is like Steven Spielberg refused to make another Indiana Jones unless it was Harrison Ford, and then Steven Spielberg doesn't direct this movie. And all I could think the entire time was I could have had Chris Pratt as Indiana Jones 5 years ago, and it would have been a better movie than this ended up being,
Okay.
or had the potential to be a better movie. I'm sure it could have been bad too. I mean,
Yeah. No, I
there's
get
been
you.
bad Indiana Jones movies, so like,
Yeah.
but that's I just kind of like kept thinking that every time I watched 80-year-old Harrison Ford punch a guy, I'm like, I could have been like, yeah, I could have been watching Chris Pratt do that, and this would have been more interesting.
Yeah. For real. I'm not in a too similar boat. I think I went into this expecting something worse than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull just based on what everyone said. And I think it'll be an interesting conversation to have if actually is worse than that. Because I think both have merits, both have not merits. But I think I ultimately came away from this movie feeling meh. Like it's not offensively bad. I wouldn't even say it's bad. I think it's not great though. It's not, it doesn't move the dial for me in terms of, I think of, top tier Indiana Jones ones. I think of the Boulder. I think of the Holy Grail. I think of, Kalima, all that good stuff. And there's not a moment in this movie that I think I'll look back on fondly outside of maybe when they get a little ahead of the plot here, but when they go through that time crack and that, initially was kind of interesting. Um,
Hmm.
but I think you brought up that intro scene, that whole train sequence. The entire time I was just thinking of The Last Crusade, thinking of how that opening scene was also a train scene, but done better. Um, and they had a different actor for Indiana Jones. They had River Phoenix play young Indiana Jones. I don't know why we could have done
Right.
that here.
And pretty
Instead,
well. It couldn't have been River Phoenix, but
no, of course not. But instead what we got was a weird CG face Harrison Ford who looks to be about 35 but sounds 80, and he's clamping around still running like Harrison Ford would probably present day, and it didn't super work. Um,
yeah.
I also just think maybe we could have skimmed that down just a little bit. I don't think we needed a whole scene to show, hey, this guy whose daughter is his goddaughter. This is why they were friends. This is, how they met and stuff. Like, we didn't necessarily need all that, but that's nitpicking. Overall, I think the story itself is serviceable. I think it goes in sort of interesting places, but doesn't fully commit. I think my biggest
Hmm.
disappointment was the overabundance of CGI, and especially when it comes to like the action scenes and the stunts and stuff. Like I think of, I forget which one it is. I think it's the Last Crusade or maybe it's Raiders, where Indiana Jones is tied onto like a truck and he's being dragged behind the truck, and
Hmm.
he goes under vehicles after a certain point. Or no, maybe it's a train. I'm getting a little mixed up here, but point is, I can tell you like behind the scenes what they did to make that work practically, and there's not an inch of that in this movie. It is all, the train. Do you really need to CGI a whole train? Do you need to? There's just a lot that just felt like there wasn't any energy, which is really weird to say because this is an action adventure movie and it had none of that.
Hmm.
So that's probably my biggest disappointment. I honestly didn't mind. I liked most of the characters. I think they were all performed fairly well. I just there's not much to work with. I don't think. I think
Yeah. I
after
just
the.
think the characters aren't interesting. Like they're acted
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, no, and I agree because I think Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, she's interesting at first, and then you see, oh no, she's not like Indiana Jones. She's selling things for a profit, which is interesting, and then it just kind of gets old quickly because she's just constantly thinking she's one-upping Indiana Jones, and it gets a little grating after a little bit. Um,
Well, there's an interesting conversation to be had about that because they tried the same thing with Shia LaBeouf's character. It's like
yeah.
it's supposed to be the Indiana Jones comparison,
Hmm.
and this is something that happens like with metatextual stuff where it's like you now when you bring a movie back in the modern day and you try and riff on the character from before, and it's like
Hmm.
happened now and twice where they've tried to riff on the Indiana Jones character and be like, look at these ridiculous things, these ridiculous aspects of Indiana Jones. It's like I
Hmm.
don't really care, dude. Like
Yeah.
honestly, Indiana like I'm not like looking up to Indiana Jones as a character, so I don't need you to tear him down and like show
Hmm.
me the bad parts of that character. I understand. Like that's not something I'm interested in. I just want an
Right.
adventure movie.
Yeah, and I think this movie tries to do something interesting with his character. They show how much out of time he might feel as he's getting older and stuff, and they play with that a little bit. Like you see in the beginning of the movie, whereas like in the original trilogy, where anytime he was teaching his class, the students would be leaping out of their seats to answer a question. Whereas in this movie, they're all like bored and falling asleep, and that's cool. And then
And
they're
he's using old school projector. Like
right. And
Which
they're
is modern tech then, but I'm just like looking at it like, dude, if I had to sit in that, oh man, I'd be so bored.
the same, but like he's trying to teach them about ancient history. They're more excited about the moon landing that's happened, hasn't, or is about to happen. I forget which, but it's one of those things where he's clearly just out of his level. He's feels like a man out of time, and the way they play with that, but they don't fully commit to it, which is a shame because I know James Mangold's good at doing like character pieces like Logan, where it kind of dissects who this character is and puts him up to like the last ultimate journey that they take. And we don't really get that with Indiana. He doesn't really go on much of a journey. I feel like I don't know.
He's
It,
forced into this. I mean, he doesn't.
mm-hmm.
It's not. He's not exactly like, well, I'm gonna go on one last hurrah.
Right.
And so you do kind of get like two versions of Indy. Like there's points at which they're like, maybe we'll do a character study of Indy, and then other points where it's like we're just doing an action adventure with an 80-year-old,
Yeah.
and it doesn't commit to either of them. Because I mean, really, like Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford is not the driver of the plot for most of this movie. Like he
No.
comes in and out at certain points, but it's mostly Phoebe's character, and then like more towards the end, Mads Mikkelsen's character,
Mm-hmm.
and so he's just kind of there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I when I left this movie, I had a thought because something I know other people have mentioned plenty of times, and I thought about it too after my last watch of it. But you look at Raiders, and as great as a movie as it is, and it is a good movie, it doesn't the outcome of that story doesn't change just because or you take Indiana Jones out of that movie and nothing changes about what happens in that movie. Like he doesn't need to be there. The same result will happen. I almost feel the same way about this movie, though maybe there's probably something someone could point out and be like, "Oh no, actually," but I got that same vibe, and that's not necessarily a negative because Raiders has great action scenes. There's a good energy to it. There's great writing and humor and stuff, but there's half of that in this movie. So you know, it
Well, and there's
does.
a way you can play that, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you play it more of the like Indiana Jones is out of his depth,
Yeah.
and Phoebe is like carrying him along, but they went in a different route where they're like, no, Phoebe actually is like playing him early on. Like
Mm-hmm.
the character was interesting at the very beginning when she was like the young, spry, like person before she did the turn.
Yeah.
That could have been fun. She could have been like the energy that Harrison Ford can't bring because he's, past his prime.
Yeah.
But they decided to go in a different direction with that kind of, yeah, like makes him somewhat unimportant to this movie.
Yeah, it kind of sucks because it feels like, you mentioned that he's kind of forced into this, and it almost feels like you're taking away the agency from him. But like you have him kind of point out, like, hey, let's go meet with Antonio Banderas, my good friend. And like you have this moment where he'll take him from like set piece to set piece, but like he's doing it because this is the journey they're on. They have to stop this old Nazi from going back and making Germany great again. But uh, the only time I feel like he really has any true agency is when they're in the past and he's talking to Archimedes. And he's like, I want to stay. And then that agency is quickly taken from him because he gets punched out. And it's like, well, we didn't get to see him ultimately make the choice to go back. And that kind of bummed me out because I think that's
Yeah.
something you see in like other Indiana Jones. Like you look at Temple of Doom, where he gets like or what is it, the jewels from that temple, and he goes back to the village that is starving and poor, and he could take it back to the museum, but he ultimately gives it back to them. That's just who he is. He ultimately makes the right decision in the end. Whereas I feel like if you want to do a character centric piece that's focused on who Indy is in the later '60s, maybe don't take away that choice from him, and you have him come to that conclusion on his own. But I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of stuff like this story starts out making sense, and slowly the farther it gets in, they start to lose kind of control over pushing the story forward. Like there's that scene where they capture the kid because he just happens to walk into the wrong like
Oh,
entryway that the guys happen to have just been there to capture him.
yeah.
And at that point, I was like, this is the wildest plot contrivance I've ever seen in my life. Like,
Hmm.
they're on a boat. Mads Mikkelsen is looking at them with binoculars and says, "Oh, they're going west,
Yeah.
not east." Somehow, without being able to see them, finds his way to the same city, and then they end up in some weird corridor exactly where the little kid ends up being, and then that's how they capture him.
Hmm.
And like going forward from there, you start having like all sorts of like weird problems. Like Mads Mikkelsen's guys, like after the beginning of the movie, just kind of follow Indy, and Indy just gives them all of the pieces, and then they just show up and like, all right,
Hmm.
now we're just gonna yoink the pieces from you, and then like it's like you're who's convinced that Mads Mikkelsen's characters and his like CIA like badasses guys are gonna find these parts without Indiana Jones? Like
Hmm.
they clearly are out of their depth, and Indy just kind of gives them the pieces to the thing and brings them to the end. And then
Hmm.
it's like they don't actually get into it, but like the dial doesn't actually do anything other than give you coordinates to a time and date and a place to be. So like
Yeah.
what if they didn't get it in time? Like if it takes them 12 hours extra to find the pieces, they just can't go back in time. Like there's no like actual it's not like the dial is caught like they say it over and over again. It's not magic, it's math.
Hmm.
And so like all the dial is doing is actually just pointing you to like a weird like wormhole essentially, like time wormhole.
Yeah, the way I interpreted it, it seemed to me that, not it doesn't necessarily, I don't know, because you're right. They mentioned that it can locate those. It doesn't necessarily create those time fissures, but what I understood is that regardless of when and where you used it, it was always going to take you back to Sicily, back when the Romans were attacking it. At least that's what I got. I think that's, yeah, something like that, which is
But
weird.
even that is a contrivance in and of itself. Like
Yeah.
why why does it have to be specifically like the I mean, that one, I guess, like you at least get something interesting out of that one. So like
Hmm.
you can let that go, right? Like there's a difference between like when you make a choice for a story purpose, like that actually does something interesting versus the one where like the kid just walks down the wrong corridor.
Right.
Like those are like I can let go of the one because it's interesting when they go back to Sicily, and that's probably the best part of the entire movie, honestly. Like after they
Yeah.
leave and go back in time,
Hmm.
it's probably the best part of the movie. And even that part, I had a lot of kind of problems with, not because it was necessarily bad, but like I thought it would have been way more interesting to like explore the idea of what if Mads Mikkelsen's character actually accomplished getting back to World War II and did the like the one of the biggest what ifs of the modern day is like what if Hitler didn't like invade Russia and like cause the end of his own rule because he almost did it. I mean, he went all the way
Hmm.
to the western side of Europe.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the most interesting questions of like what if he actually like won the war. So that's a much more interesting idea to me that they could have played with. But this was still fun, like going to Italy and experiencing this. And like I said, I mean, it was well acted. Harrison Ford still can like
Oh
act
yeah.
really well, and so he this like his awe of meeting someone and being a part of history is awesome.
Hmm.
But I think it would have been a better ending if he decided to stay and died experiencing history in real life. Like the historian who gets to experience a moment in history is a way better ending than the one that we ended up getting. Because like everything they did in the end of the movie, they did in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Because again,
Hmm.
that movie was also supposed to be the end of Harrison Ford and his arc in Indiana Jones. So we redid a whole bunch of pieces of like he gets a new kid, and instead of Shia LaBeouf, it's Phoebe, and
Yeah.
he re-meets Marion again at the end of this movie for
Yep.
like the I'm. But instead of like the we get married and run off into the sunset, we get the like they're a family. Like he kisses Marion one more time, and they have the like funny callback with the where
Hmm.
doesn't it hurt bit. But
Yeah.
like I much rather would have just had him stay, Phoebe go back, and maybe you just do like a full on thing where it's like Phoebe is actually just Indiana Jones now. He gives her his hat, and you do something like that, and then Indiana Jones, you get to watch him like experience a moment in history and
Mhm.
die happy after you build up this guy who's lost everything and doesn't understand his place in the world anymore.
Yeah, and I think you feeling that way because I'm not completely like in my bones. I feel like the movie has to end with him back in the present, but I can't justify it based on what we got in the movie. And I just don't think the movie gave us enough to actually get to that conclusion. I just there's a lot missing here that keeps this from being a truly good movie. Or yeah, because like I can see your point, and I honestly thought the movie was gonna end that way, but like he had a bullet wound. He would have died in like days, if not sooner. So I don't know. That old man
Which
had
I
a.
think is fine. Like I think
Mhm.
there's even if he the like he meets Archimedes and they you know they don't really explore this part of it because they don't get much into the timepiece, but
Right.
clearly like they had to go back in time to cause them to be able to go back in time because they make
Yep.
it so that Archimedes understands that he can build the dial and it works.
Yeah.
But there's another version of that where he has that conversation with Archimedes. Phoebe and the kid get in the plane and fly away, and we get to watch uh, Indiana Jones just like sit on the hillside and watch this moment in history and then end.
Hmm.
And I don't know that you need more than that. Like that, he gets his whole piece out where like maybe you had a conversation with Phoebe where he goes like, I don't understand my place in the world and I'm getting to experience history. And then she says, all right, I understand, and goes off and they have a nice moment.
Hmm.
And then that's the end of Indiana Jones. And the other piece of that that makes it great is it means that we're 100% not going to get another Harrison Ford Indiana Jones
Yeah.
because we do not need another Harrison Ford Indiana Jones. Like they just need to stop.
Yep.
Like honestly.
I agree. That's something they've been pretty insistent on that this is going to be the last Harrison Ford led Indiana Jones movie. But that
But
last
again, that's what they tried to do in the last one, and they
right.
couldn't stick to it.
Exactly, and they've been saying that for a while now. Even Harrison Ford's like, no, because like he's the one who loves playing Indy. Like he loves, maybe he doesn't love Han Solo, but he loves playing Indiana Jones. But even he was like, yeah, no, I'm getting too old for this shit. I can't do this. So this will be my last hurrah as it is. Um, but you have that last shot where he's with Marion in the kitchen, and you see the hat hanging outside the window, and you get that little like zoom in on it as he grabs it, and then the screen just kind of completely like closes into black, and it's like, well, is this the last one? Because the way you ended it makes me think that there's gonna be another one. Yeah, it boggles me. I don't
I
get
don't
why
know
they did
why you
that.
even need to leave the door open for that.
You don't. Because I think even Lucasfilm is like, yeah, no, we're done with Harrison Ford Indiana Jones. Whether or not we do a spin-off or a prequel, that's something else. But we're done with Harrison Ford after this.
Yeah,
So,
and I do think the other part of it too, like the reason I think that it would have been better if it was like a Chris Pratt Indiana Jones because this series clearly needs a reset.
mhm.
Like they're not like it. I kept watching the movie and being like, this feels like out of place in modern media. Like it doesn't
Yeah,
like fit into the action adventure world that we're in now. And so like it's hard to kind of like place it in anything, and it doesn't feel, it's not like nostalgic because they use a lot of modern CGI and
hmm,
they don't really like do the fondness for the past outside of like the characters come back, like Marion comes back, and what's his name, Sala or whatever, the Egyptian guy,
yeah, solid.
he comes back. um but other than that, it's not like a we're living one last adventure in the past nostalgia type thing. And so they need a reboot to kind of refine where this series would fit in modern media because it doesn't like kind of mesh with what's going on nowadays all that well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it definitely feels disconnected from the rest of the movies, even from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which also has its fair share of CG, but there's still some practicality to some of it. Um, it definitely it feels like it. and I'll credit the directors on this one because I think Spielberg really got it when he did Crystal Skull, and James Mangold, not that he doesn't know how to do a good movie, he just doesn't know how to do a good Indiana Jones movie, and I think that you feel that. Um, but like you look at even Crystal Skull, and they all have that feel like a good pulp adventure that's just fun to like watch, and even if it's not gonna you're not gonna be thinking about it for hours or weeks after the movie's over. It's just a fun, schlocky movie with this guy who you can kind of project yourself onto and just have a fun adventure looking for treasure, and maybe something weird happens when you find the treasure. But this kind of loses that, doesn't have that magical feel. It doesn't feel like I'd be reading this out of like a pulp magazine, and I think a good reset would definitely help for that for sure.
And
Um,
I I think that like the reason it doesn't feel that way is because of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Like
mhm.
the fact that Mads Mikkelsen character has to say like 4 times literally, this isn't magic, it's math,
Yeah.
is a direct like response to what happened from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where everyone was like, aliens? Like actually aliens? They just come down and like there's an actual alien ship and they do weird mind melding bullshit.
Hmm.
So like they clearly because like you clearly could have leaned more into the time aspects and done some really pulpy fun stuff. And they
Yeah.
clearly made a decision like as a response to that movie. Like we can't do that because people like had such a problem of when they did it with aliens. And like it's I don't know because I've been trying to like place it in my mind why Kingdom of the Crystal Skull doesn't work because like ultimately it's not like the other movies were realistic or
Hmm.
like the first one he literally opens a casket and like mist comes out and melts people away like
Right.
it was not like it was mystical from the beginning, and so
Hmm.
I'm not 100% sure why Crystal Skull doesn't work in specific. And because like for me, like I have such a like vivid memory of watching that movie in theater and being in all the way until I literally saw an alien. Like and then I was like, what is happening? And that's like
Hmm.
at the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
So like, people like talk about the giant ants and Shia LaBeouf swinging with the monkeys, and
Doesn't look
that's
good.
like pulpy and kind of out there,
Yeah.
and it's not great, but like it's not the worst thing I've seen in these movies. Like
Mm.
it at least fits in the realm of like the craziness other than being bad CGI.
Right.
But like what are you gonna it's 2008. I mean like
Hmm.
CGI, it's we've talked about this before, but like there's so many movies in the early 2000s that you just don't hold up because CGI they went to CGI and CGI
Yep.
wasn't where it's at now.
Yep.
And so it just feels so out of place. But I'm not sure why that one doesn't work with the pulpiness because like if you do a time like bending thing here, I think it would work. Like even if you lean into it more, I think it
Hmm.
would still like I wouldn't have a visceral reaction in the same way that I kind of did to the aliens. And maybe it's because like you're in the first one you're talking about religion, and to an extent I mean you're talking like when they're doing uh like the Indian religions, like it's kind of racist religion bait, but
Hmm.
like it's still religion, so I guess it's more like realistic
Yeah.
than the aliens. But so I guess time being the fact that we all experience time all the time, I think it maybe that would have made it more palatable for people, but I think they could have leaned into that way more and it would have
Hmm.
made the movie better. Like
Yeah.
had they cut a lot of the stuff in the beginning and made it more like say they go with the route that I'm talking and like in the first third they go back in time to Nazi era,
Yeah.
and the second 2/3 of the movie are like dealing with the consequences of the new Hitler like succeeding or almost succeeding or however you want to handle that. Like you could have had a way more interesting action adventure movie
Hmm.
built off of that because it's a fun time bender, and then you find a way for Indiana Jones to come back to the modern day and experience, um, you know, a world saved from the consequences of that
Hmm.
could have been way more interesting than the kind of stuff that we got in the beginning that didn't end up working.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think yeah, they could have done that because like you could replace the artifacts they're looking for with just about any artifact, and it wouldn't change the set pieces that we went through to get to where we got to. So I think you know, bend it to commit to the time concept a little bit more. Have a I don't want to call it a time heist because that sounds derivative, but like have a fun little adventure throughout time. That could be interesting. But yeah, I agree. I agree on that point. I will say too, in terms of walking back of what they did with Crystal Skull, it's kind of weird how they did Mutt so dirty in this one. That that strike you as weird, or was that just me? That felt odd.
Well, it felt to me, I don't know that they did him dirty, other than like, yeah, probably like, would Mutt's character go join the army? Probably not. I mean, I
No,
don't.
probably
It
not.
doesn't seem like something that he would do.
Especially for
But it's
Vietnam.
I yeah, I mean to me it was like they went Shia LaBeouf's not going to come back, or they asked him and he didn't come back. I'm sure they
Right.
probably didn't even ask him because they didn't want him back.
No,
But they
probably
went
not.
like that and they were like, how do we get rid of him? And then they were like, the war. And then like it was a throwaway. I mean, it's not the best like for his character motivations, but I'm fine with it because I knew they weren't going to bring him back.
Yeah.
I'm annoyed they did him dirty in so much as they brought back a different version of his character as like a second indie.
Yeah.
That's annoying. So like in that sense, yeah, and they didn't even like I guess the thing that makes it worse is like his character wasn't great, but he was
No.
like an archetype, like a perfect version of an archetype
Hmm.
of that like, you know, greaser character. And so like that's a fun idea. At least it was a fun like that's fun. Phoebe's character is not even like a fun character. She's just kind of annoying the whole
Hmm.
time. And so like they did it dirty and so much as like they didn't even solve the issue that they created
Nope.
of like the indie kid character. They didn't make a better version. So like yeah, I guess in that sense, maybe the character just doesn't work, which is kind of like the thing I was talking about of like, do I want a breakdown of Indiana Jones's pulpy character? Not really. Like, I don't care that he's not a very good person. Like any like I I just don't it's not something that I need in these crazy like pulpy adventure movies. I just don't care.
Right. I just feel like they used it as a way to put a rift between him and Marion and then have him have something he wanted to go back and change if he got the dial. And I just felt like they could have done something different than, you know, killing his kid.
Okay.
But I don't know.
So I don't know if I know we talked about this before with J.J. Abrams,
Hmm.
and there's a video by Patrick H. Willems about how J.J. Abrams is really good at taking things from the past, like nostalgia,
Yep.
and making you love them, but he's not great at creating new things. If you
Yeah.
replaced James Mangold with J.J. Abrams as the director of this movie, it probably works, honestly,
Mm.
because a lot of the stuff that they did was just recreate things from the past. Like
Yeah.
they brought back the kid character. You can replace Phoebe's character with Marion's character, and you have two different characters from movies in the past that are like
Hmm.
just recreations of versions of them.
Bring back short round.
It's- yeah. So like you could have just like if you replace J.J. Abrams with James Mangold, you probably have a serviceable Indiana Jones film that's just like let's replay the hits. And like, you know, Harrison Ford at 80 still doesn't work great, but like
No.
it probably would have been a better version in so much as like they don't try to do anything new and they just relive the good old days. They could have made some money and hopefully ended it there. But
Yeah.
I don't know. They didn't yeah, in some sense they tried to like bring back thing that and that's kind of my problem. Like it's why I didn't like the Marion stuff is like I don't want that stuff to come back. Like
Hmm.
I if you're gonna get rid of it. That's fine. Like if they would have not had any of those characters, they didn't have Mutt, they didn't have Marion, they didn't have Saul, they didn't have any of them. I would have been perfectly fine with that. Like her being the picture on his wall that makes part of him being the grumpy old man would have been enough for me. Like
Yeah.
it didn't feel necessary to have them come back.
No. especially when you consider that this is the second time the relationship's been on the rocks like that. It's like,
Exactly.
how many times are we gonna go through this? The entire like last 5 minutes of this movie is just pure fan service, and I'll
And I don't even think it's good. Like that's the problem. Like
well,
I
and
don't.
I'm a sucker for that shit because I love reliving the hits and stuff. So it got me, but it's like looking back on it, it's like where if you're gonna do this, why not do it the entire movie? Be consistent. I know you have references to Last Crusade and the other movies scattered throughout here and there, but it's like it's heavy handed at the end there, and it's kind of
I wonder.
obnoxious.
I wonder because this movie was in production for so long, if
Yeah.
there was two different movies, and or two different versions of this movie, and they ended up getting melded together. There's one that's like a version that is the like J.J. Abrams style nostalgia movie,
Hmm.
and there's one that's like we're getting rid of all of it, and it's this weird time bending movie, and they didn't end up going with either of them. They tried to put the two of them together and it doesn't work. Like I wouldn't be surprised if that comes out that there was like different versions of this
Hmm.
movie over the years, and the one that we got was just kind of a mushed together mess of the different versions.
I could see that. I'd have to do some digging because it does feel like there's some ideas mixed around here. I think I remember reading and if you're in chat or in the comments, call me out on this if I'm wrong, but I thought I remember seeing somewhere that they had test screenings for this movie with a different ending where Indy actually dies. But I might be full of shit, so don't take that as gospel. But I don't know. That could have been interesting. Well, James Bond, No Time to Die.
Well,
Daniel Craig.
well, like hopefully they even that one. I don't know. I don't know. That's a different conversation because I don't know how to
Hmm.
feel about that.
Yeah, completely
That
different.
movie
But
was bad, but uh,
different conversation. I liked it, but no big deal.
yeah, but I don't know what to do with the ending to that movie because they tried to play it almost like he doesn't, but he does, but he doesn't. Like
Hmm.
it's one of those things where it's like there are no clean deaths anymore.
No.
And like this one of the things that's great about Game of Thrones and stuff like that is like people die and then they're dead and they
Yeah,
don't come back.
they stayed
Like
it.
the only reason it works when a character almost dies and comes back is if you believe that they actually could die. And like at this point, it happens so little that big characters die that it's hard to like even feel any type of way about it.
Hmm.
And so I mean, I guess now that we're thinking about it, like Harrison, the other version of Harrison Ford's like big character Han Solo does die, and like you get that. So like you know you can do it. Is the point? Is like you can kill off main characters that are beloved, and like I think it would have been better if they went that way.
Well, to your credit, they also did bring Han Solo back for a scene in The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
So even then,
in like a weird way too.
it was
So
very weird. Very weird.
not I'm not trying to like be an apologist for those movies because they have
No,
huge problems, but
classic JJ. But
yeah, I think that's probably our thoughts on that movie. It wasn't great. It wasn't horrible,
no.
but it also didn't need to exist.
Do
And
you
I
rank
think the
it?
box office plays that out.
Yeah, I think we'll see that. It might make a short climb. I don't think it's going to be successful by any stretch. But do you think Do you think it's better or worse than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull?
I think it's better.
Okay.
I haven't seen Crystal Skull in a long time, and I
Hmm.
watched part of it not that long ago, but I didn't watch the ending, which is the part that I hated.
Right. Because
So
yeah.
I don't know. I Here's the thing: is like, well, yeah, I don't know because like there's a there's a world where Crystal Skull is a good movie too. So
Hmm.
like I think they both are like near misses,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
I think they have different problems in some ways, but you know what? Here's what I'll say. I'll say Crystal Skull is better because
Hmm.
at least Steven Spielberg committed. Like he
Yeah.
committed to what he wanted to do, and this movie feels like they didn't want to commit to any one thing. So, just on like pure like artistic freedom and like you really went for it, I'll say that Crystal Skull is better, even
Hmm.
though it has similar problems.
Yeah. I have been flip flopping ever since I saw Dial of Destiny. I think ultimately I can name at least two or three different action sequences from Crystal Skull as opposed to maybe one that's no, none of them stood out to me in Dial of Destiny. They were all quite boring. Uh,
Like the weird cart chase, I hate that scene was so
mm,
boring to me.
yeah, I think the one cool chase scene they could have had was the horseback ride in the parade that leads into the subway, which is probably the one scene I'll remember from this movie, if anything. But
But
like,
again, now
there,
now we're like breaking it down. Like every time I watch these scenes, I'm like,
mhm,
that's an 80-year-old man riding that horse like he's 35,
right,
and I'm like, the cognitive dissonance doesn't work in my brain. Like I can't put it apart when I'm watching him like drift a cart through Algiers or Tangiers or wherever they are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And even with the horse scene, it's like, well, I can think of a different scene from Crystal Skull where they're chasing them through the city, and it's noticeably less CG, and it's more fun.
Yeah.
So I do have plenty of problems with Crystal Skull. I don't love the ending. I don't love Mutt. I don't know. It's a close one for me. I think it'll change based on what day it is, but I think honestly, no, I can't justify it. I'm thinking I'll put Dial of Destiny over Crystal Skull, but just barely.
Here's the thing: is I'll probably never watch either of them ever again.
Oh
So
no, same.
like they basically are in the same boat. I mean, you could flip flop them all day, every day, but they're both forgettable movies.
Hmm.
And like this movie isn't even like bad enough to be like funny to watch. Like the
No,
scene with Indiana Jones in the lead fridge is like funny enough that you can watch it and be like, "Ha, that's bad."
that's real
Like
bad. Yeah.
and like be like fun, like have fun watching that. Whereas like I'm not gonna like hate watch any of this.
No,
Like there's nothing about it that I would be like, I need to see this again.
no. It's just
It's just not memorable in any way.
exactly. None of the action stood out. None of the characters are super memorable outside maybe Indy, but like it's
Matt's
just
character was fun. I mean, especially towards the end when he gets more like once he drops the "I'm not a Nazi" persona, he's way
hmm
better as a character because like Mickelson, he just gets to be like the crazy person that he is. Like he gets to
yeah.
do these like I mean that's why you have him in this movie is because he
Hmm.
can play a crazy character. And so like
Yeah.
once he shed that part, he is like a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and he has that really good line towards the beginning of the movie too, where he's in that hotel and he's talking to that waiter, and he says, "You guys didn't win the war. Hitler just lost." And it's like, where are we going with this? This guy seems cool. He should have died in the first scene of the movie when he got hit by that post on the train.
Oh
But
yeah,
like,
that was so ridiculous, and I knew you knew it was coming back because
yeah,
it's not like they
he's
hid that he was the villain.
right.
So like I was just like, why did you have to do it like that though? Because
Hmm.
they he was like almost lost before that, and then shows back up. Why not just have not have the second piece of that
Yeah,
and just like let him go away the first time, and then you're like, oh, he's back, and like okay,
yeah. There were a couple of moments in that cold open. Number one was where Indy was hanging from that noose and the bomb goes off and everyone else is dead, but he's not somehow. And then
yeah,
you have it. I don't know. I forget if it's Matt's character, but they're fighting on the train. They go through a tunnel and he holds him up against the ceiling. And it's like Indy should have died at least twice, and then Matt should have died that one time for
yeah,
sure. So, and we're not even counting when they jump off the train into the water because that's how movies work. That's never gonna kill anyone. Uh, but
yeah.
I don't know. This movie forgettable. I won't watch it again probably. If you haven't seen it and you're still with us, I'm gonna suggest wait till it's on demand or
Yeah,
on
it's
Disney
not worth
Plus.
seeing. You don't need to go to the theater to see this. You can wait.
I will give a quick shout out to the lady sitting next to me in the theater. She was like halfway out of her seat the entire time and was laughing
Oh
at
my god.
every joke.
Dude, we were in this theater with two older ladies who were
Hmm.
like couldn't stop. Like they like every time the most obvious thing happened. Like the Marion kissing scene. They're
Yeah.
like, "Oh my god, remember that?" Like
Oh my
really
god.
loudly. So like they were trying to whisper but just talking at normal voices. So
Hmm.
like they were laughing at all of the jokes. They were getting like all of the obvious references. They're like, "Oh my god, that reference!" It was hilarious the
That's
whole time.
so funny. I love that. I will. I think there is actually. I take it back. There is one thing I think I'll remember fondly about this movie, but and it's when they're about to dive into the water. Which weird that we haven't seen that in an Indiana Jones movie before, but um, they're talking about how there's eels, and someone makes the comment that they're like snakes, and then Indiana Jones is very quickly like, no, no, they're not. That got a laugh out of me. That got me.
I don't even like. I don't know how to feel about that. That's whatever. We don't even need to get into
No,
that.
the
But
eel scene was pointless. All he did was flail and he got out of it just fine. It's fine.
why are they attacking him? I don't know. Like
It didn't even seem like they attacked him. It was just a bunch of CG blurs. I didn't.
they took a metal box that has nothing to do with food for eels. Why did they care? I don't like the whole thing is
Yeah.
dumb. Whatever.
The same with the bugs. That lasted all of like 5 seconds, and it's like, well, this could have been a fun callback to Temple of Doom, but y'all let it sit for 2 seconds and left it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
All right. Yeah. Don't need to see this movie
Nope.
if you don't want to. It's not something you need to run out and see.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. 2.5
I
out
don't
of
do
5,
that
3 out of 5. So
But
there you go.
it's forgettable.
Very forgettable. Well, I think that about wraps up our thoughts on this movie. Yep, don't see it unless it's on demand.
Unless you really want to. I mean, it's not
True.
a horrible movie.
True.
If you want to see it, see it. If you don't, don't. If you're on the fence, wait.
Yeah, if you're a fan of the other Indiana Jones movies, if you didn't think Crystal Skull was that bad, yeah, go check it out. It's a fun time, kind of. Doesn't need to be 2.5 hours. I digress. This has been our review of Indiana Jones and see
The
I,
Dial of Destiny.
the Dial of
The
Destiny.
Oracle of Old Age.
The problem is I can remember all the other titles so clearly, and every time I say them, I feel something like, oh, that's a good movie, or oh, that's a bad movie. This one, it's just I feel nothing. I feel nothing.
Also, now that we're talking about it, why Destiny? Whose Destiny? It's not even Mads Mikkelsen's Destiny. Like, it's not a dial to anyone's destiny.
Archimedes, since he was like, you need to come back in time to help me. Let me set this dial to have you come back in time to help me, because you did it.
The thing that's weird about that is like it's not like it's Archimedes' crowning invention. Like
No.
so like it's not even the destiny of like it's the thing we all know Archimedes for. So like it's no one's destiny. They just tried to do like a wordplay thing.
They try to make it sound bigger than epic, more epic than it was. I don't know. Crystal Skull, Temple of Doom. Oh, those sound cool, but was it really the Temple of Doom? Was it really? Did they call it that? I don't know. It is what it is. Indiana Jones, man. I'm glad we're done making new movies. I'm waiting for that to age.
Hope.
I'm waiting for that clip to age like milk. So clip that out and bring that out whenever they announce the next movie.
Please, for the love of God, do not make another one of these movies. Jesus Christ.
Steven Spielberg, I know you're listening. Get Chris Pratt on the phone. Get Ke Huy Quan. Get the old gang
I don't even
back
know.
together.
Here's the thing: is like I don't even know if you can do a Chris Pratt one at this point.
No, I don't think so. I think
It was so obvious, and they didn't do it.
he might be a little too buff to be Indiana Jones. They'd probably have him shrink a bit. I don't know if he's the right
Well,
body type
and
at this point.
he did it as he was Indy as the character in Jurassic Park.
There we go. That's the closest we'll get to Chris Pratt. Indiana
So
Jones.
like he already did the character. Like he did a riff on the character in a different world. But like that's all you're gonna get. Now we're
Yep.
gonna have to wait for the next person. It's like Idris Elba's Bond. We missed that one too.
God,
That
that's
sucks.
so disappointing.
So we have to find the next person who is definitely not going to be as perfect as the character for the character as those two were.
No, yeah. It's one of those things where like I didn't think James Gunn would find a good Superman but he finds someone that I've never heard of, and B looks a lot like a Superman I could picture in my head at least. So I don't know. It's one of those things where maybe they find someone, but like I also would prefer they don't, just leave him. I think Harrison Ford, this is his character. Maybe we just leave it and let it lie like that. But Hollywood.
Well, they could at least, I mean, they could do like the weird fan casting thing. Like everyone for the new Percy Jackson TV series is like, oh, make the original characters the Greek gods. So then they can be like, it's a hint, hint, wink, wink. So like maybe you can make Harrison Ford be Indy's dad. Like he can be
Sure.
like play the new version of that. And then you can be like, have fun with it, even though I don't know that I'd want to see that. But like, it probably will be a thing.
Who's the guy that played young Han Solo? Let's get him. What's he up to?
Oh,
What's his name? Alden Ehrenreich or
Aaron
something?
Aaron Reich. Yeah, he just I don't know.
He
I
doesn't
don't
have
know
the
that they
energy.
could.
He doesn't have the
Yeah,
charisma.
no, he's too suave. Not
No,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's part of the thing with Chris Pratt. Is I think he's lost that at this point. Like there was a moment in time where you could have captured that, and it's past this point now.
He used to be a lovable like vagabond, but now he's like action hero.
People have learned too much about him now. They know about his hunting and his
That
weird stuff
too.
with his wife and all that.
That too.
And so people couldn't like.
Yep. No, that would. Anyway.
Do
Cool.
what you want. Like I could still see Chris Pratt as it. I just don't think anyone would. I don't think they'd cast him as it.
I don't think that would sell as well as it could, or maybe it would 'cause it's the name. But let's just leave Indiana Jones alone. That's my vote. That's my vote. Alrighty.
Yeah, it won't happen, but we can hope.